The water splashed across her $15,000 Valentino gown in slow motion, and I knew my life was over. 10 years of loyal service, gone in 3 seconds because the woman I just soaked? She's about to become my new boss's wife, and what she whispers to me in that kitchen when no one's watching will destroy everything I've fought to survive. Welcome back, family. Today's story begins with a single moment that will change everything. The accident happened so quickly. One moment, Gabriela was refilling crystal glasses, her mind on her mother's medicine she needed to pick up tomorrow. The next, Señora Valeria Dominguez Reyes swept backward from her chair without looking, her diamond bracelet catching the light as dramatically as her theatrical laugh. They collided. Water arced through the air in slow motion. Or perhaps that was just how Gabriela would remember it later, when she replayed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. The pitcher tilted, and a cascade of ice-cold water splashed across crimson silk. Valeria's scream could have shattered the chandeliers. "My dress!" She shot to her feet, water dripping from the Valentino gown that cost more than Gabriela earned in 2 years. "You clumsy, stupid girl! Do you have any idea what you've done?" The dining room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward them. Wealthy guests in evening wear, their conversations dying mid-word. Gabriela's hands trembled as she grabbed napkins, her apologies tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Señora, I'm so sorry, please, I didn't see—" "Don't touch me." Valeria slapped her hands away. She turned to Señora Rosa Castellanos, who had risen from the head of the table, her aged face pale with distress. "Rosa, I have tolerated many things in the name of our friendship, but this is unacceptable. This servant has ruined a $15,000 gown." "Valeria, please," Señora Rosa began. "No." Valeria's voice turned cold as winter. "Either she goes, or the Dominguez Reyes family withdraws from every business venture we share with the Castellanos name. Choose." Gabriela looked desperately toward Don Eduardo, the elderly patriarch who had always treated her with kindness. But he sat silent in his wheelchair, his roomy eyes full of sadness and shame, saying nothing. Age and illness had stolen his voice in more ways than one. Señora Rosa twisted the napkin in her hands, her internal struggle visible on her face. Finally she spoke, not meeting Gabriela's eyes. "Gabriela, I think it would be best if you collected your things." The words hit like a physical blow. "Señora, please. 10 years I've worked here. This was an accident. My mother, she's sick. I need this job. I'm sorry." But Señora Rosa's voice held finality, not sorrow. "You'll receive 2 weeks' pay. Please leave tonight." 30 minutes later, Gabriela stood on the corner of Avenida Presidente Masaryk, a duffel bag at her feet containing everything she owned. In her pocket, 43 pesos and a crumpled bus schedule. Behind her, the Castellanos mansion glowed like a palace in a fairy tale, one she'd just been banished from forever. She had no savings, no family except her ailing mother. No prospects in a city where dismissal from a wealthy household meant no other wealthy household would hire you. The night air was cold, but not as cold as the fear settling into her bones. Gabriela picked up her bag and started walking, though she had nowhere to go. Behind her, through the mansion's windows, the dinner party continued. The wealthy had already forgotten her name. The metal park bench had left ridges pressed into Gabriela's cheek. She woke to gray dawn light filtering through the ahuehuete trees of Chapultepec Park, her body stiff and aching, her mouth dry as sand. For one merciful moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The spilled water, Valeria's scream, the mansion's golden windows disappearing behind her. Her stomach cramped with hunger. The 43 pesos had bought her a bag of chicharrones last night, nothing more. She sat up slowly, her black uniform dress wrinkled beyond recognition, and watched early morning joggers pass by. They didn't see her. Nobody ever really saw people like her. By 8 o'clock, Gabriela was riding the metro toward Iztapalapa, clutching a crumpled flyer someone had pressed into her hand near the station. Day laborers needed. Construction work. Cash paid daily. The words blurred as the train rattled through dark tunnels, but she held onto them like a lifeline. The construction site was chaos. Half-finished walls reaching toward the sky, cement mixers grinding, men shouting over the noise. The foreman, a thick-necked man with sun-damaged skin, looked her up and down with undisguised skepticism. "You ever done this kind of work?" "I'm strong," Gabriela lied. "I learn fast." He shrugged. 50 pesos for the day. You haul bricks from the truck to the site. Keep up or go home." 50 pesos. Barely enough for 2 meals, but it was something. The first brick burned her palms, even through her thin gloves. By the 10th trip, blisters had formed. By the 20th, they had burst, leaving raw flesh that screamed with each new load. The August sun climbed higher, turning the construction site into an oven. Sweat poured down her face, stinging her eyes, soaking through her dress until it clung to her skin. The men noticed. "Mira, Mira!" one called out, elbowing his companion. "The little maid thinks she's tough." "I'd give her something else to carry," another laughed, making an obscene gesture. Gabriela kept her head down, kept moving. She had heard worse before. She could survive worse again. But then rough hands grabbed her waist from behind. "Where are you going so fast, mamacita?" She spun, dropping the bricks, her voice sharp with fear and fury. "Don't touch me!" The man stepped back, hands raised in mock innocence, grinning. His friends howled with laughter. Within minutes, the foreman was in her face. "You're causing problems, distracting my crew." "I didn't do anything. He grabbed me." "I don't care. Get out. No pay." "But I worked." "You want me to call security?" His hand moved toward his radio. Gabriela's throat closed. She thought suddenly of being 15, standing in her aunt's doorway with a backpack and nowhere to go. You're too much trouble, Gabriela. Always too much trouble. The same helplessness, the same abandonment. Separated by 10 years that had taught her nothing except how to hurt quietly. She left without another word. The sun was setting when she returned to Chapultepec Park, her hands wrapped in torn cloth, her body screaming with exhaustion. She had earned nothing. She had eaten nothing since yesterday's chicharrones. In her pocket, 28 pesos left. Gabriela sank onto the same bench and watched the park come alive with evening. Families pushing strollers, couples walking hand in hand, children chasing soccer balls across the grass. Normal people living normal lives. Lives that seemed as distant as the stars beginning to appear overhead. Her voice came out hoarse and broken, singing to no one. "I try and try, but nothing's working out for me. It feels like the end of the road." A jogger passed, earbuds blocking out the world, blocking out her pain. Gabriela pulled her knees to her chest and closed her eyes against the gathering dark. Tomorrow, she would have to try again. Tomorrow, she would have to keep surviving. But tonight, she had nothing left except the hollow certainty that God had looked away from her long ago. The stars were fully visible now, pinpricks of light in Mexico City's hazy sky. Gabriela remained curled on the bench, her wrapped hands throbbing, her stomach a hollow ache. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across her. "Excuse me, señorita. Are you all right?" She looked up sharply, instinctively pulling her duffel bag closer. The man standing before her was perhaps 45, distinguished in a way that spoke of quiet wealth. Tailored slacks, a crisp shirt with rolled sleeves, salt and pepper hair combed back from a kind face. Everything about him screamed danger to someone in her position. "I'm fine," Gabriela lied, straightening on the bench. Ricardo Mendoza, though she didn't know his name yet, didn't move away. "Forgive me, but you don't look fine. You look like someone who needs help." "I don't need charity." The words came out harder than she intended. "I'm not offering charity." He gestured to the bench. "May I sit?" Every instinct told her to refuse, but exhaustion had worn away her defenses. She nodded warily. Ricardo sat, leaving respectful distance between them. For a long moment, he said nothing, just watched the park's evening activity, the same families and couples Gabriela had been observing with such longing. "My wife used to love this park," he said finally. "Sofia. She'd bring our dog here every evening, even when she got sick, especially when she got sick." His voice held the particular grief of recent loss. "Cancer took her 8 months ago. The house has been empty ever since. Too big, too quiet, too full of memories." Gabriela's suspicion wavered. She recognized that hollow tone, the sound of someone trying to fill a void. "I'm sorry for your loss," she murmured. Ricardo turned to look at her. Really look at her. "What's your story? And please don't tell me you're fine again." Perhaps it was his directness, or the fact that she had nothing left to lose, or simply that the dam inside her had finally cracked. Whatever the reason, Gabriela found herself talking. The words spilled out like the water from the pitcher. The dinner party, Valeria's cruel face, Senora Rosa's betrayal, the construction site, the grabbing hands, the foreman's dismissal. She told him about her mother's death 2 years ago, about being orphaned at 12, about her aunt's rejection at 15. When she finished, her cheeks were wet with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. Ricardo was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight with controlled anger. People can be incredibly cruel to those they consider beneath them. He met her eyes. "I need someone to manage my household. A real position, not a charity case. Fair wages, your own room, meals provided. The house is too much for me alone, and the cleaning service I've been using has no soul, no care." Gabriela's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why would you offer this to a stranger?" "Because Sofia taught me that kindness is never wasted, even when, especially when, the world is cruel." His smile was sad. "And because I recognize someone who's been kicked while they're down. I won't insult you with pity, but I can offer you respect and honest work." The word respect broke something open inside her. When had anyone last offered her that? What if I disappoint you?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then we'll figure it out together. But somehow, I don't think you will." Gabriela looked at this stranger, who spoke of his dead wife and empty houses, who had stopped for someone the rest of the world ignored. She thought of the park bench, the 28 pesos, the hunger gnawing at her insides, the endless uncertain tomorrow stretching before her. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, thank you. I accept." Ricardo's Mercedes glided through the streets of Lomas de Chapultepec 40 minutes later, climbing toward the hills where the truly wealthy lived. When they pulled through iron gates and the house came into view, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, modern and elegant, Gabriela felt tears threaten again. Maybe, she thought, pressing her bandaged palm against the cool leather seat, maybe God hasn't forgotten me after all. If you're enjoying Gabriela's journey, please hit that like button, drop a comment below telling me what you think will happen next, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. Now, let's continue. The room was painted a soft cream color that caught the morning light and held it gently. Gabriela woke on her 3rd day in Ricardo's house and still couldn't quite believe it was real. The queen-sized bed with its crisp white linens, the window overlooking the garden where bougainvillea climbed the wall in cascades of magenta, the private bathroom with water pressure that didn't sputter and die. At the Castellanos mansion, she had slept in the servants' quarters, a windowless room in the basement that smelled perpetually of bleach and damp concrete. Here she had sunlight. Here she had space. She rose and opened the window, breathing in the scent of jasmine from the garden below. Somewhere in the house, she could hear Ricardo's footsteps, the soft murmur of his voice on a phone call. Normal sounds of a life beginning. The days developed a rhythm that felt almost miraculous in its simplicity. Gabriela would wake early and prepare breakfast, sometimes chilaquiles with homemade salsa verde, sometimes fresh fruit, and pan dulce from the bakery Ricardo had shown her down the street. She'd tend the garden in the cool morning hours, deadheading roses and watering the herbs she'd started in terracotta pots. The house itself became her canvas. She polished the already clean surfaces, not because Ricardo demanded it, but because she took pride in the work. "You don't have to do all this," Ricardo told her one afternoon, finding her on her hands and knees scrubbing grout that was already spotless. "I want to," Gabriela replied simply. And it was true. For the first time in her 25 years, her labor felt like choice rather than survival. The evenings were her favorite. Ricardo would return from consulting meetings, loosening his tie and heading straight for the kitchen where Gabriela had learned to prepare the dishes he loved best. Pozole rojo that simmered for hours until the hominy was tender. Tamales wrapped carefully in corn husks. Carne asada with fresh tortillas. They'd eat together at the kitchen island, and slowly, conversation began to flow. He told her about Sofia, how they'd met at university, her infectious laugh, her stubbornness during her illness, her insistence that he keep living after she was gone. "She made me promise," Ricardo said one evening, swirling wine in his glass, "not to become a ghost in my own house. She'd be furious if she could see how I've been living these past months." "I think she'd be proud of you for trying," Gabriela offered quietly. Ricardo's smile was grateful. "My daughter Isabella is studying architecture in Barcelona. She's so much like her mother, fierce, brilliant, impatient with mediocrity. We video chat every Sunday." He pulled out his phone to show photos. A young woman with Sofia's dark eyes and Ricardo's decisive jaw, standing before Gaudi's Sagrada Familia. "She's beautiful," Gabriela said, and meant it. "She is, and she'd like you." Ricardo tucked the phone away. "Actually, I'm hoping she'll come home soon for a celebration." Something in his tone made Gabriela glance up. "A celebration?" Ricardo's expression turned almost shy. "I've been seeing someone. Daniela. We've been dating for a few months now, and I think I'm ready to move forward. I'm planning to propose next week. If she says yes, we'd like to have a small wedding in 3 months." Gabriela's heart warmed at the happiness in his voice. "That's wonderful, senor. I'm so happy for you. Please, call me Ricardo, and thank you." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings, for both of us." "To new beginnings," Gabriela echoed, clinking her water glass against his wine. That night, lying in her comfortable bed, with the window cracked open to let in the cool evening air, Gabriela stared at the ceiling and felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing hope of survival, but the gentle, steady hope of a future that might actually hold happiness. She thought of Ricardo's kindness, the garden waiting for her tomorrow, the pozole recipe she wanted to perfect, the safety of these walls around her. "I could get used to this," she thought, as sleep pulled her under. "I could be happy here." Outside, the night was peaceful. The city lights glowed softly through her window. She had no way of knowing that everything was about to change again. The doorbell rang at 7:30 on a Wednesday evening, just as Gabriela was pulling a tray of chiles en nogada from the oven, Ricardo's favorite. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved toward the foyer, expecting a delivery, or perhaps one of Ricardo's colleagues. Ricardo was already at the door, his face alight with an excitement Gabriela had never seen before. "Gabriela, come meet someone very special." She rounded the corner, a welcoming smile already forming on her lips. It died the instant she saw who stood in the doorway. Valeria Dominguez Reyes. The same crimson-painted lips. The same cold eyes now widening with delighted recognition. The same cruel elegance draped in designer clothing. But this time, she was wrapped around Ricardo's arm, a massive diamond glittering on her left hand. Time seemed to stop. Gabriela felt the blood drain from her face, felt the kitchen floor tilt beneath her feet. Gabriela, this is Daniela Valeria Dominguez Reyes, my fiancée. Ricardo beamed, oblivious to the sudden chill in the air. Valeria, this is Gabriela Martinez, my household manager. She's been absolutely wonderful. Transformed this house into a home again. Valeria's smile was a blade wrapped in silk. Oh my. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. The clumsy maid. What a small world. Ricardo's brow furrowed slightly. You two know each other? Briefly, Valeria purred, moving into the house like she already owned it. She used to work for the Castellanos family, friends of mine. Her eyes found Gabriela's, and the message there was crystal clear. I won. Really? What a coincidence. Ricardo squeezed Valeria's hand. See, mi amor? This is what I love about you. You believe in giving people second chances, just like I do. Gabriela had some difficulties at her last position, but she's proven herself invaluable here. How generous of you, darling. Valeria's tone could have frozen water, but when she turned back to Ricardo, her face was radiant with love. You have such a beautiful heart. It's one of the many reasons I said yes. Gabriela stood frozen in the hallway, unable to speak, unable to move. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Something smells wonderful, Ricardo said, sniffing the air. Gabriela, are those chiles en nogada? Yes, senor. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I'll set the table. She fled to the kitchen, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the serving platter. Behind her, she could hear Ricardo giving Valeria a tour of the house, his voice full of pride and happiness. Valeria's laughter rang out, bright and musical, the same laugh that had preceded Gabriela's destruction 5 weeks ago. Dinner was torture. Gabriela served the meal with downcast eyes, trying to be invisible again, trying to survive. Ricardo and Valeria sat close together, his hand covering hers, discussing wedding plans with the ease of people who had never known true hardship. This is delicious, Gabriela, Ricardo said warmly. Don't you think so, mi amor? Valeria took a delicate bite, her expression thoughtful. It's adequate, though the sauce could use more walnut, and the poblanos are slightly overcooked. She dabbed her lips with a napkin. At the Castellanos mansion, the chef never made such mistakes. Ricardo frowned. It tastes perfect to me. You're sweet, darling, but I do have a refined palate. Valeria's smile was poison wrapped in honey. After Ricardo excused himself to take a phone call, Valeria's mask dropped instantly. She rose from her chair and moved toward Gabriela, who was clearing plates in the kitchen. Let me make something very clear, Valeria hissed, her voice low and venomous. Ricardo is mine. This house will be mine, and when we're married, I will make every single day of your pathetic life a living hell until you quit, or until I convince him to fire you. Either way, you will suffer. I haven't done anything to you, Gabriela whispered. You exist. That's enough. Valeria reached out as if to hand Gabriela her plate, then accidentally tilted it. The remaining chile en nogada slid off in slow motion, splattering across the pristine kitchen floor. Oops! How clumsy of me. Clean that up, would you? She walked away, calling sweetly, Ricardo, darling, I'm ready to see the master bedroom. Gabriela sank to her knees, reaching for the cleaning supplies with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The carefully prepared meal, hours of work, spread across the tile like a crime scene. She scrubbed mechanically, tears mixing with soapy water, creating rivers that caught the kitchen light. Through the ceiling, she could hear Valeria's laughter, could hear Ricardo's deep voice responding with affection. Not again, Gabriela whispered to the empty kitchen, to the god who seemed determined to test her. Please, not again. But the house offered no comfort, only the echo of Valeria's footsteps overhead, already claiming what would soon be hers. The weeks blurred together in a nightmare of calculated cruelty. Valeria had moved into the house temporarily to help with wedding planning, and her presence infected every corner like black mold. She found fault with everything. The coffee was too bitter. The towels weren't folded correctly. The flowers Gabriela arranged were common and tasteless. A woman of your background wouldn't understand aesthetic refinement, Valeria said one morning, dumping a vase of fresh roses into the trash. Try again. And this time, don't embarrass Ricardo in front of our guests. But the verbal abuse was nothing compared to the physical intimidation. On a Tuesday afternoon, as Gabriela reached for serving plates in the kitchen, Valeria's hand shot out and grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Her manicured nails dug into Gabriela's flesh hard enough to leave crescents of broken skin. Listen to me carefully, Valeria hissed, her beautiful face contorted with rage. You think you're safe here? You think Ricardo actually cares about you? You're a servant, a nobody. And when I'm mistress of this house? The sound of Ricardo's Mercedes in the driveway cut her off. Valeria's grip released instantly, her expression transforming like a mask snapping into place. By the time Ricardo walked through the door, she was all smiles, adjusting Gabriela's sleeve with false concern. Careful with those plates, Gabriela. We wouldn't want another accident. But the psychological warfare was even more insidious. Valeria worked on Ricardo with the precision of a surgeon, planting doubts during their private moments. Darling, you've been so trusting with Gabriela, she'd say, her voice honeyed with concern. But do you really know anything about her? What if she, I don't know, has a history of instability, of theft? Valeria, that's unfair. I'm just worried about you, mi amor. You're too kind for your own good. Sofia would want me to protect you. Invoking his dead wife's name always worked. Ricardo would go quiet, uncertain, and Gabriela would feel his eyes on her with new wariness. The breaking point came on a Thursday night, 6 weeks before the planned wedding. Gabriela had finished cleaning and was heading to her room when she noticed light spilling from Ricardo's study. The door was ajar. Inside, she could see him sitting at his desk, staring at a framed photograph of Sofia, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. She should have kept walking, but something in his posture, the slump of his shoulders, the terrible loneliness radiating from him, made her pause. Senor, are you all right? Ricardo looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. It's the anniversary of her death, 1 year today. He gestured to the photo. I thought I was ready to move on. But tonight, I'm not sure of anything anymore. Gabriela stepped into the study, propriety forgotten. May I ask you something? Do you love her, Valeria? The question hung in the air like smoke. Ricardo was quiet for a long moment. I thought I did. She's beautiful, cultured, from the right family. She makes sense on paper. He met Gabriela's eyes. But when I'm with her, I don't feel at home. Not like I did with Sofia. Not like I feel when... He trailed off, but the unfinished sentence filled the space between them with dangerous electricity. What makes a home isn't the furniture or the building, Gabriela said softly. It's the feeling you get when you walk through the door. It's knowing someone sees you, really sees you, and cares anyway. It's the small kindnesses that don't require an audience. Like pozole on a hard day, Ricardo said, almost smiling. Like jasmine in the garden, because someone remembered I mentioned liking it. Their eyes met and held. Something shifted in the air, something neither of them dared name. Ricardo? Valeria's voice rang out from upstairs, sharp with suspicion. Where are you? Reality crashed back. Gabriela stepped away quickly. I should go. I'm sorry for your loss, senor. Sofia sounded like a beautiful person. She fled before he could respond. What neither of them knew was that Valeria had been standing in the hallway, listening to every word. Her face, reflected in a darkened window, was a mask of pure fury. The next morning, Valeria cornered Ricardo before breakfast. "It's either her or me." "What? Valeria, what are you talking about?" "That girl, Gabriela. She's inappropriate. The way she looks at you, the way she speaks to you, it's disrespectful to our relationship. If you love me, you'll fire her, today." Ricardo ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. "Valeria, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" Her voice turned icy. "Choose, Ricardo. Your housemaid or your future wife." From the kitchen, Gabriela heard raised voices, but couldn't make out words. When Ricardo emerged, his face was troubled, but resigned. "Gabriela, can I speak with you?" His tone was apologetic. "Valeria feels uncomfortable with... She thinks it would be better if you maintained more distance. Professional boundaries. Can you try to be less visible when she's around?" It wasn't a firing, but it was a capitulation. Gabriela nodded, her heart sinking. "Of course, senor." Ricardo left for work looking defeated. Valeria appeared in the kitchen doorway, her smile triumphant. "See how easy that was? He'll always choose me in the end. You're nothing but hired help, and you do well to remember it." That night, lying in her beautiful room that suddenly felt like a cage, Gabriela stared at the ceiling and faced the brutal truth. "He won't save me. I'm on my own. Again." The storm is getting worse for Gabriela, and we're only halfway through her story. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think she should fight back, or should she leave before things get worse? And make sure you share this with someone who loves dramatic storytelling. Let's continue. 2 weeks before the wedding, Valeria arrived at the house carrying bags from an expensive gourmet market, her smile bright enough to hurt. "I'm sending Gabriela home early today," she announced to Ricardo over breakfast. "I want to cook you a romantic dinner myself. Just the two of us, like a married couple." Ricardo looked pleased. "That's thoughtful of you, mi amor." Gabriela felt ice slide down her spine. In all the weeks Valeria had been staying here, she'd never once expressed interest in cooking, never once wanted Gabriela gone. "That's not necessary, Señora," Gabriela said carefully. "I'm happy to prepare whatever you'd like." Valeria's eyes flashed dangerously. "I said I'm cooking. You have the afternoon off. Go." "Actually," Ricardo interjected, "Gabriela, why don't you stay? You could help Valeria if she needs anything. Consider it a learning opportunity. Valeria studied culinary arts in Paris." Valeria's jaw tightened, but she recovered quickly. "Of course. How generous of you, darling. Gabriela can assist." The kitchen became a stage for something Gabriela couldn't name but could feel in her bones. The same instinct that had warned her seconds before the water pitcher accident, before the construction worker grabbed her. Danger, sharp and immediate. Valeria worked with surprising competence, preparing coq au vin with unnecessary flourishes and commentary. In Paris, we learned that French cuisine is about precision. One wrong ingredient ruins everything. Gabriela stood by the counter, pretending to chop vegetables, but watching. Always watching. It happened so quickly she almost missed it. Valeria glanced toward the doorway, where Ricardo's voice could be heard on a phone call, then reached into her designer purse. A small glass vial emerged, filled with white powder. Valeria uncapped it with practiced ease and tipped a generous amount onto one of the two-plated dinners. Gabriela's breath caught. Her hands froze on the knife. Valeria stirred the powder into the rich brown sauce until it disappeared completely, then set that plate on the left side of the counter. She prepared the second plate normally and placed it on the right. "Gabriela," Valeria said, without looking at her, "be a dear and light the candles in the dining room. I want everything perfect." Gabriela's legs felt like water, but she moved. In the dining room, her hands shook so badly the matches kept going out. Through the doorway, she could see Valeria in the kitchen, hear the soft clink of dishes. When Gabriela returned, both plates sat on the counter, but their positions had switched. The poisoned plate was now on the right. Valeria was washing her hands at the sink, humming softly. "Ricardo prefers to sit at the right side of the table, facing the garden," she said conversationally. "So that plate goes on the left place setting. The one you're reaching for right now." Gabriela's hand hovered over the plate on the right, the poisoned one. Her eyes met Valeria's in the reflection of the kitchen window. Valeria's smile was serpentine. "Go ahead, serve dinner." I should serve from the left. Are you questioning me?" Valeria's voice sharpened. "Just do as you're told for once." But Gabriela saw it now, the trap. If she served the poisoned plate to Ricardo and he got sick, Valeria would say Gabriela must have tampered with the food. If she refused, Valeria would make a scene about insubordination. Either way, she lost. With trembling hands, Gabriela carried both plates to the dining room, setting them down exactly as Valeria had indicated. Ricardo entered, kissing Valeria's cheek. "This looks wonderful, mi amor." They sat. Gabriela stood by the kitchen doorway, her heart hammering, watching as Ricardo lifted his fork to take the first bite. Valeria suddenly gasped, clutching her throat. "Valeria, what's wrong?" Her face contorted. I can't breathe. Something's wrong." She knocked over her wine glass, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Her hand scrabbled at her throat, eyes wide with theatrical terror. "Call an ambulance!" Ricardo shouted, rushing to her side. Gabriela stood frozen in horror, unable to move, unable to speak. Valeria's eyes found hers through the chaos, and in that moment, Gabriela saw the truth. Valeria had taken a small amount herself, just enough for drama, just enough to sell the performance. "The food," Valeria gasped, pointing a shaking finger at Gabriela. She did something. I saw her." "What?" "No. I didn't. You were alone in the kitchen." Valeria's voice was barely a whisper now, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. "After I stepped out, you had access." Ricardo stared at Gabriela, his face a battleground of confusion and dawning suspicion. "Gabriela, is this true?" "No, senor, I swear." The paramedics arrived within minutes, sirens wailing. They stabilized Valeria, who clutched Ricardo's hand, and sobbed convincingly. A police car pulled up behind the ambulance. "I want to press charges," Valeria said weakly. "Attempted murder. She's been jealous, unstable. Ricardo, please. She tried to kill me." "Miss Martinez?" A police officer turned to Gabriela. "We need to ask you some questions." "I didn't do anything." Gabriela's voice broke. "Please, you have to believe me." "Go to your room," Ricardo said quietly, his voice hollow. "Just go." Gabriela fled upstairs, her world collapsing for the third time. Through her door, she could hear the murmur of official voices, the crackle of police radios, Valeria's convincing sobs. She sank to her knees beside the bed, hands clasped in desperate prayer. "Please, God, please. I survived being thrown out once. I survived the streets, the hunger, the humiliation. But I can't survive prison. I can't survive this." Her voice dissolved into sobs. "This is truly the end." Below, she heard the paramedics loading Valeria into the ambulance, heard Ricardo's car starting as he followed them to the hospital, heard the police officer's voice. "We'll need to take her in for questioning first thing tomorrow morning." Gabriela pressed her forehead against the floor and wept. Gabriela spent the night curled on her bed, fully clothed, staring at the wall as dawn crept through the window. She had packed her duffel bag again, the same worn bag from the park bench, from the Castellanos' mansion, always ready to run, always ready to lose everything. The sound of Ricardo's Mercedes returning at 6 in the morning made her flinch. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs, moved past her door. She heard the study door close with a firm click. An hour passed. Then another. Gabriela sat frozen, waiting for the police to arrive, waiting for handcuffs and accusations she couldn't fight. Instead, she heard Ricardo's voice explode through the house. "Valeria!" More footsteps. A car in the driveway. Valeria returning from the hospital where she'd spent the night, under observation for her supposed poisoning. Gabriela crept to her door, pressing her ear against the wood. "Darling, I'm so glad to be home." "Don't." Ricardo's voice was ice. "Don't say another word." "Ricardo, what's wrong? I'm still weak from that horrible girl's attack." "Stop lying." The words cracked like a whip. "I know what you did." Silence. Then Valeria's voice, honey-sweet but with an edge. "I don't know what you mean." "The security cameras, Valeria. I installed them 6 months ago for document security. They cover the entire first floor, including the kitchen." Gabriela heard the sharp intake of Valeria's breath. "Come here. Watch this." The sound of footsteps moving to the study. Gabriela slipped out of her room and crept to the top of the stairs, her heart hammering. Ricardo's voice continued, cold and precise. "There. 6:43 p.m. You reach into your purse. Is that a vial in your hand? Hard to tell from this angle. But let's keep watching. Oh look, you're adding something to the left plate, stirring it carefully. And now, yes, there it is. You switch the plates when Gabriela leaves the room, crystal clear. That's not, you're seeing things. And here's my favorite part." Ricardo's voice dripped with contempt. "When you clutch your throat so dramatically at dinner, we can see you're eating from the unpoisoned plate. You staged everything. The question is, what was your plan? To make Gabriela look like she poisoned me? Or were you always planning to take a small amount yourself and frame her for attempting to poison you?" "Ricardo, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." His voice rose. "You wanted to destroy an innocent woman because of what? Jealousy? Cruelty? Some sick need for control? She's nothing. A servant. She doesn't deserve— Get out!" The roar shook the house. Gabriela had never heard Ricardo raise his voice before. "Ricardo, darling, please, we can fix this. I did it for us, don't you see? That girl was coming between us. The only thing between us is your pathological need to destroy anyone you perceive as beneath you. I've called off the wedding. I've contacted my attorney. And if you don't leave my house in the next 5 minutes, I'm sending this footage to the police." "You wouldn't dare." Valeria's voice turned venomous. "My family will destroy you. The Dominguez Reyes name has connections you can't even imagine. We'll bury you in lawsuits, ruin your reputation. Try." Ricardo's voice was granite. "I have evidence of attempted murder and conspiracy. What do you have? A last name and empty threats. Get out." A pause. Then the sharp crack of Valeria's heels on marble, moving fast. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. Gabriela stood at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down her face, unable to move. "Gabriela?" Ricardo appeared at the bottom of the staircase, his face exhausted but determined. "Please, come down. I need to show you something. I need to apologize." On shaking legs, she descended. Ricardo led her to the study, where his computer screen showed the frozen image of Valeria reaching into her purse, her face twisted with concentration and malice. "I should have trusted you," Ricardo said quietly. "I should have seen what she was. I'm so sorry I doubted you, even for a moment." Gabriela watched the video play, watched her own innocence proven in pixels and timestamps. The relief was so overwhelming, it felt like drowning. "You see?" Ricardo said softly, pausing the video on Valeria's face, caught in the act. "Good things come to good people. Finally." Something broke open inside Gabriela. All the fear, all the exhaustion, all the times she'd been blamed and accused and thrown away. She collapsed forward, and Ricardo caught her, his arm steady and warm as she sobbed against his shoulder. "It's over," he murmured. "I promise you, it's over." Later, they stood together at the window as Valeria's car, trunk stuffed with designer luggage, face twisted with rage, disappeared down the driveway and through the iron gates. Ricardo's hand rested gently on Gabriela's shoulder. "She can't hurt you anymore." Gabriela nodded. But she could feel something shifting between them, something that had been building since that first night in the park, since pozole dinners and garden conversations, since the moment he'd chosen to believe in her innocence. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me." "Thank you," Ricardo replied, "for staying, for not running when things got hard, for being exactly who you are." Their eyes met in the window's reflection. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting gold across the garden where Jasmine climbed the walls. It was over. But they both knew, standing in that charged silence, that something new, something neither of them dared name yet, was just beginning. 6 months passed like a gentle exhale after years of holding her breath. The house settled into a new rhythm, one built on mutual respect, shared laughter, and something neither Gabriela nor Ricardo dared name aloud. They cooked together now, his hands brushing hers as they chopped vegetables. They sat in the garden at twilight, conversation flowing easily between comfortable silences. He called her Gabby. She called him Ricardo, no longer Señor. When Isabella returned from Barcelona for Christmas, she saw it immediately. "Papa," she said on her second evening home, watching from the kitchen doorway as her father and Gabriela debated the proper way to prepare mole. "You're in love with her." Ricardo nearly dropped the wooden spoon. "Isabella, it's okay." Isabella moved to hug him, her voice soft. "Mama wouldn't want you alone forever. She'd want you happy. And Gabriela makes you happy. I can see it in your eyes. You're alive again." That night, Ricardo found Gabriela in the garden, pruning roses under the moonlight. "Isabella thinks I'm in love with you," he said without preamble. Gabriela's hands stilled on the shears. "And are you?" "Terrified to be, but yes." He stepped closer. "You?" "Terrified to hope, but yes." They stood in the jasmine-scented darkness, not quite touching, both waiting for permission to want what seemed impossibly good. "When the time is right," Ricardo said finally, "I'd like to ask you something important, but not yet. Not until you're completely sure this is what you want, a future with a widower who comes with baggage and a very opinionated daughter." Gabriela smiled through sudden tears. "I'd like that, when the time is right." The call came on a Tuesday morning. Don Eduardo Castellanos had passed peacefully in his sleep at age 73. Gabriela attended the funeral, standing in the back of the crowded church, watching from the shadows as Mexico City's elite paid their respects. Señora Rosa looked diminished, older, her face etched with regrets that came too late. After the service, Rosa approached hesitantly. "Gabriela, I'm glad you came." "He was kind to me," Gabriela said simply. "I came to honor that." "I should have been stronger that night. I should have defended you." Rosa's voice cracked. "I've thought about it every day since." "I forgive you, Señora." And surprisingly, she meant it. 3 days later, the lawyer's call came. Gabriela had been named in Don Eduardo's will. Her presence was requested at the reading. The lawyer's office was all mahogany and leather, filled with Rosa's relatives waiting like vultures. Gabriela sat in the back, Ricardo beside her for moral support, both confused about why she'd been summoned. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and read, "To Gabriela Martinez, who served our household with dignity and grace, who was wronged under our roof and offered no protection, I leave the entirety of the Castellanos mansion, including all furnishings, artwork, and grounds, plus a trust fund of 8 million pesos to maintain the property or use as she sees fit." The room erupted. Rosa went pale. Relatives shouted about incompetence, about undue influence, about challenging the will. But the medical records were clear. Don Eduardo had been of sound mind, had met with lawyers privately, had been explicit about his wishes. The will stood. 2 months of legal battles followed, but ultimately, the courts ruled in Gabriela's favor. Standing in the grand foyer where she'd once spilled water and lost everything, Gabriela felt the weight of impossible justice. This mansion, symbol of her humiliation, was now hers. "What will you do with it?" Ricardo asked that evening as they walked through empty rooms. Gabriela stopped in the dining room where her life had shattered. "Something Sofia would approve of." She turned to him, eyes bright with purpose. "A shelter. For women who've been displaced, fired unjustly, left with nowhere to go. Women like I was. We'll call it Casa Sofia." Ricardo's smile was radiant. She would have loved that. Isabella became the program director, her architecture training perfect for redesigning the space. Ricardo helped establish the nonprofit, using his business connections to secure funding. Within 6 months, Casa Sofia opened its doors. The proposal came on a spring evening in their garden now, legally and spiritually. Ricardo knelt among the jasmine he'd watched her tend, holding a simple gold band. "Marry me, Gabby. Build a life with me. Let's honor the people we've lost by living fully." "Yes," she breathed. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small. Isabella, a handful of close friends, and the first residents of Casa Sofia. No elaborate gowns or crystal chandeliers. Just love, witnessed and celebrated simply. 5 years later, Gabriela stood in the transformed mansion's main hall, now a bright community space filled with women, some fresh from crisis, some thriving and preparing to move forward. Ricardo sat in the audience, their 3-year-old daughter Sofia balanced on his knee. 5 years ago, Gabriela began, her voice steady. "I stood in this very garden as a servant. I was fired unjustly for an accident that wasn't my fault. I became homeless. I was hungry and desperate, and convinced God had abandoned me." She paused, meeting the eyes of women who knew that same desperation. "But I survived. And here's what I learned. They can fire you, but they cannot break you. They can humiliate you, but they cannot steal your dignity. They can take your job, your home, your security, but they cannot take your worth. That belongs to you alone." Tears glistened on several faces. "I inherited this house, but more importantly, I inherited the knowledge that I deserve good things, that we deserve good things, not because we're perfect, but because we're human, because we refuse to give up, because we survive." Applause filled the room. Ricardo beamed. Isabella wiped her eyes. Later, as families departed and the evening settled into peace, little Sofia tugged her mother's dress. "Mommy, are you a princess?" Gabriela knelt, cupping her daughter's face. This miracle child born into love and security, who would never know hunger or homelessness. "No, mi amor. I'm a survivor, and that's better than any princess." Through the windows, the mansion glowed with warmth and purpose. In the garden, Jasmine climbed the walls where shadows had once hidden a servant invisible to those she served. Now those same walls sheltered women learning to see themselves as Gabriela had finally learned to see herself, worthy, valuable, unbreakable. The golden windows reflected not wealth, but hope, and that was the greatest inheritance of all. Thank you so much for watching Gabriela's journey from servant to survivor to savior. Her story reminds us that our worth isn't determined by how others treat us, but by how we refuse to give up on ourselves. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss our next inspiring story. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than your circumstances. See you soon.